More than 4,000 years ago, there was an empire so powerful it united the world for the first time. It had wealth beyond imagination. It had armies that were undefeated. It had, most importantly, the favor of the gods. Then, according to ancient texts, the gods turned against it. What followed was famine, madness, abandonment, and total collapse. This is the story of the Curse of Akkad, the first empire that dared to anger the gods. Imagine a time before Rome, before Greece, before even the great pyramids of Egypt reached their final height. Round 2300 BCE, in the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, a man named Sargon of Akkad did something no one had ever done before. He built an empire. Not just a kingdom, but a true empire that conquered and united dozens of city-states under a single banner. This was the Akkadian Empire. It ruled over all of Mesopotamia, the lands of summer, and controlled trade routes that stretched for thousands of miles. For the first time in history, a vast, multicultural landscape answered to one ruler. The Akkadians weren't just seen as powerful, they were seen as divinely chosen. The gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon, powerful beings like Enlil and Ishtar, were believed to walk with the empire, granting it victory and prosperity. Sargon was their high priest, their chosen vessel on earth. Under his rule, Akkad became the center of the known world, a beacon of civilization and strength. But this golden age, this belief in divine protection, would not last. Power, it turns out, can be a corrupting force, and the successors of Sargon would learn this lesson in the most brutal way possible. After Sargon's legendary reign, his grandson, a man named Naram-Sin, took the throne. At first, his rule was a mirror of his grandfather's success. He was a brilliant military commander, pushing the borders of the empire even further. He crushed rebellions, conquered new lands, and brought Akkad to its absolute zenith of power. The empire was larger, richer, and more dominant than ever before. Naram-Sin was the undisputed master of the world. And then, something changed. Victory after victory, conquest after conquest, can breed a dangerous kind of pride. Naram-Sin began to see himself not just as a king, but as something more. He did the unthinkable. He declared himself a god. On monuments and carvings, he was depicted wearing a horned helmet, a symbol previously reserved only for the gods themselves. His name began to be written with a divine determinative, the cuneiform sign that meant God. He placed himself on the same level, or perhaps even above, the ancient gods of Mesopotamia who his grandfather had so carefully honored. And according to the scribes who chronicled these events on clay tablets, this was the moment everything broke. This act of supreme arrogance was a crack in the foundation of the world, and it was about to bring the entire structure crashing down. In the heart of Mesopotamia, in the holy city of Nippur, stood the most sacred place in the entire land, the Echo, the temple of Enlil. Enlil was no minor deity. He was the god of wind, storms, and, most importantly, fate. He was the king of the gods, the one who decreed the destinies of both mortals and immortals. His temple was the spiritual center of the universe, a place so holy that no king, no matter how powerful, was ever allowed to damage or disrespect it. To touch the Echo was to challenge the cosmic order itself. Naram-Sin, in his divine arrogance, did more than touch it. He marched his army to Nippur, and he destroyed it. Ancient texts describe the sacrilege in horrified tones. He took axes to the sacred gates, tore down the walls, and looted its treasuries as if it were just another conquered city. He defiled the one place that connected the heavens and the earth. To the people of Mesopotamia, this wasn't just a political act. It was blasphemy beyond forgiveness. He hadn't just attacked a building. He had spit in the face of the god who held the fate of the world in his hands. And then, the curse began. The aftermath of Naram Sin's sacrilege is recorded in one of the most terrifying pieces of ancient literature ever discovered, a long poem called the Curse of Akkad. It's not a dry historical record. It's a visceral, horrifying account of a world coming undone. The poem describes how the god Enlil, in a rage, unleashed a series of calamities upon the land. The curse wasn't just a simple punishment. It was a complete inversion of the natural order. The poem states, in chilling detail, for the first time since cities were built and founded, the great agricultural tracts produced no grain. The inundated tracts produced no fish. The irrigated orchards produced neither syrup nor wine. The thick clouds did not rain. Famine, swift and brutal, swept across the most fertile land in the world. The fields turned to dust. The rivers, once teeming with life, became barren. The sky, once a source of life-giving order, went silent and empty. The poem's descriptions of the social collapse are even more disturbing. It speaks of a civilization unraveling at its seams. Starvation turned the gleaming streets of Akkad into scenes of desperation. The prices were high. A person would sell their children for gold. It describes people gnawing on leather straps, mothers turning away from their starving children, and a pervasive madness setting in as society crumbled. The earth itself, once a nurturing mother, was now described as rejecting humanity, a hostile forespent on its annihilation. Akkad, the jewel of the world, was becoming a living hell. But according to the poem, the gods did something far worse than simply sending famine and drought. They didn't just punish Akkad, they abandoned it. The curse was not just destruction, it was silence. The temples, once vibrant centers of ritual and communication with the divine, went quiet. The priests performed the rites, the people offered their prayers, and the kings made their sacrifices. But nothing happened. The gods were gone. The statues in the temples, believed to be physical manifestations of the deities, were said to have been returned to their celestial homes. Akkad was no longer protected. It was an empire left exposed, vulnerable, and alone. And its enemies, who had long feared Akkadian might, saw their chance. From every direction, invaders began to chip away at the crumbling empire. Most fearsome of all were the Gutians, a fierce tribal people who descended from the Zagros Mountains. The poem describes them as a people who knew no inhibition, with human instincts but canine intelligence and monkey's features. They swept into the heartland of Mesopotamia, and the once invincible Akkadian armies, weakened by famine and spiritual despair, could not stop them. The world's first empire didn't just decline. It collapsed with breathtaking speed. What happened next is one of history's greatest mysteries. Akkad didn't just fall like Rome or other great empires, leaving behind majestic ruins for future generations to marvel at. It vanished. The capital city of Akkad, the very heart of the empire, the city that Naram Sin had filled with looted treasures, has never been found. Despite a century of searching, archaeologists have no idea where it is. For centuries, the entire Akkadian Empire was thought to be little more than a myth, a legend like Atlantis, existing only in the stories of later civilizations like the Babylonians and Assyrians. Then, archaeologists began to find evidence, not of the city itself, but of its destruction. Across Mesopotamia, they discovered layers of ash, signs of widespread abandonment in ancient cities, and geological data pointing to a sudden, catastrophic climate event. There was a massive, multi-generational drought that struck the region at exactly the right time. The evidence in the soil was consistent with the horrors described in the poem: crop failure, famine, and the collapse of urban life. So, was it a curse from an angry god, or was it a tragic coincidence of climate change? The timing is so precise, it's chilling. So, was the Curse of Akkad real? Modern science offers a compelling, rational explanation. Around 2200 BCE, a massive, abrupt drought struck the Middle East and much of the ancient world. It lasted for decades, perhaps even a century. Crops would have failed year after year. The mighty rivers Tigris and Euphrates would have shrunk. Civilizations across the region, not just Akkad, show signs of stress or collapse at this exact time. It was a climate catastrophe on a scale that ancient societies were simply not equipped to handle. But the ancient people of Mesopotamia didn't have satellite data or ice core samples. They didn't see atmospheric pressure systems, they saw the will of the gods. When the rains stopped and the fields turned to dust right after their king declared himself a god and destroyed the most holy temple in the land, they didn't see it as a coincidence. They saw it as cause and effect. They saw punishment. And so they recorded it not as a climate report, but as a moral warning, a story of hubris and divine retribution passed down for thousands of years. This is why the story of Akkad still haunts us. It's more than just history. It's a foundational myth. The Curse of Akkad is the oldest recorded warning in human history, a 4,000-year-old lesson that resonates to this day. It's a story that tells us that unchecked power can invite its own destruction. That arrogance, especially the kind that places humanity above the natural or divine order, invites collapse. And most terrifyingly, it's a story that shows us that a civilization, even the most powerful one on earth, can disappear. Not just be conquered, but be erased. Without ruins. Without survivors to tell the tale. Without answers to why it all went wrong. The Akkadian Empire serves as a permanent reminder that no matter how advanced, wealthy, or powerful we become, we are never truly safe from collapse. Akkad ruled the world. It was the first, the biggest, the most powerful. And then, it was erased so completely that even its streets were swallowed by time. As if the gods never wanted it remembered at all.